Welcome back to the horror video. Tonight, I bring you a terrifying true story that took place deep in the heart of a forgotten small town. Turn off the lights, settle in, and prepare yourself for the chilling tale of the Brimstone Hollow haunting. Brimstone Hollow, a town once bustling with life, now sits eerily abandoned. Locals believe that this place, hidden deep within the Appalachian Mountains, was cursed after a series of tragic events back in the 1950s. But tonight, we focus on one incident in particular, a nightmarish experience that shook even the most skeptical of investigators. Story number 1. In the summer of 1973, a group of paranormal investigators decided to spend the night in Brimstone Hollow's infamous manor house, known locally as the Devil's Den. The house had been left untouched since the sudden disappearance of the original owners nearly 50 years earlier. What was meant to be a routine investigation quickly spiraled into a living nightmare. The lead investigator, a man named Jacob Riley, was an experienced skeptic. He had spent years debunking ghost stories, but even he couldn't explain what happened that night. From the moment they stepped inside, the air felt thick with dread. The investigators reported feeling a constant pressure, as if unseen eyes were watching their every move. As the night wore on, things took a dark turn. Strange, unidentifiable noises echoed through the house, faint whispers, shuffling footsteps, and something that sounded like nails scratching along the walls. But the most terrifying encounter happened at 3:15 a.m., the so-called witching hour. Jacob set up a camera facing the hallway, where a door was known to open and close on its own. As he stared through the lens, the door creaked open, but what emerged wasn't just a draft. A shadowy figure, tall and distorted, slowly formed at the end of the hallway. It didn't walk, it glided, almost hovering above the floor. Its hollow eyes seemed to lock onto Jacob through the camera. Suddenly, all the lights went out, and the investigators were plunged into complete darkness. In the chaos, someone, or something, whispered Jacob's name. But when the lights flickered back on, no one was there. In a panic, the team tried to flee, but the doors wouldn't budge. It was as if the house itself refused to let them leave. One of the investigators collapsed, gasping for air, claiming that invisible hands were gripping his throat. The others watched in terror, unable to help. After what felt like an eternity, the front door swung open on its own, and the group stumbled out, desperate to escape. But the horrors didn't end there. Jacob's camera footage, which he hoped would provide answers, instead captured something far worse. Upon reviewing the footage, the camera recorded a figure standing right behind Jacob, something no one saw at the time. Its face was twisted in an unnatural grin, its eyes filled with malevolent intent. The final frames of the tape showed the figure reaching out, before the footage cut to black. After that night, Jacob refused to speak about what happened. The tapes were locked away, and the team disbanded. But those who visit Brimstone Hollow today still report seeing shadowy figures lurking in the woods and hearing whispers carried by the wind. Some say the spirits in Brimstone Hollow are still waiting for those brave, or foolish, enough to enter. So, next time you hear a whisper when no one's around, remember, you might not be alone after all. Story number 2. Baxter's Diner was the kind of place that felt frozen in time. Tucked away along a desolate stretch of highway, it had been open since the 1950s and was popular with truckers and night owls. But by 1987, it had earned a reputation for something far darker. Employees would often whisper about strange happenings during the graveyard shift. Flickering lights, cold drafts on windless nights, and the feeling of being watched. But it was always chalked up to tired minds and overactive imaginations. That is, until one night when a new waitress named Lucy took the midnight shift alone. Lucy was new to town and took the job to make ends meet. She wasn't superstitious and didn't believe the local ghost stories, that is, until her first solo shift. It started out like any other night, quiet and uneventful. But by 2:30 a.m., things took a turn. Lucy noticed that one of the lights above a booth began flickering. She grabbed a chair to check it out, thinking it was just a loose bulb. But as she reached up, the light suddenly went out entirely. In the pitch-black silence, she heard it, the unmistakable sound of a chair scraping against the floor. Her heart raced as she turned around. There, sitting in the booth that had been empty moments earlier, was a man. He wore a black coat and a fedora pulled low over his face. Lucy was startled. She hadn't heard anyone come in. But what was even stranger was that he didn't move. He just sat there, facing away from her. Lucy was startled. She hadn't heard anyone come in. But what was even stranger was that he didn't move. He just sat there, facing away from her. She tried again, her voice shaking slightly, but still, nothing. Frustrated, she leaned in closer, and that's when she noticed something chilling. The man wasn't breathing. His skin looked cold and waxy, almost like a mannequin. Suddenly, the man's head snapped toward her, and those hollow, lifeless eyes locked onto hers. His mouth opened as if he was about to speak, but no words came out, just a low, rattling wheeze. Lucy stumbled back, dropping the menu, and as she did, the lights flickered back on, but when she looked up, the man was gone. The booth was empty, as if he had never been there. Lucy ran to the phone to call her manager, but as she picked up the receiver, she heard a voice whispering on the other end. It was faint, but unmistakable. "Don't let him in." Panicking, she hung up and rushed to lock the front door. Just as she turned the bolt, the bell above the door rang. Even though no one was there, she watched in horror as a frosty handprint materialized on the glass, right where the stranger's face would have been. Lucy knew she wasn't alone anymore, but whatever was with her wasn't human, and it wanted in. Lucy never finished that shift. She quit the next morning and left town without looking back. But the next person to take her place reported seeing the same man in the booth, always between 2:30 and 3 a.m. Rumor has it that years ago, a drifter was found dead in that very seat. His heart had stopped, and his body remained sitting upright until morning. To this day, Baxter's Diner still stands, though it's long been abandoned. But those who pass by late at night claim to see a single light flickering inside, and if you listen closely, you might hear the jingle of a doorbell, followed by a slow, deliberate knock. So, next time you're on a late-night drive and feel the urge to pull over for a quick snack, think twice. You never know who, or what, might be waiting to join you. Story number 3. It all started in 1992 when the Morgan family inherited a sprawling, 19th century home from a distant relative. The house was filled with relics from the past, but one object stood out, an enormous, ornate mirror found hidden away in the attic. It had a dark, polished wooden frame, carved with intricate designs, and despite being covered in dust, it seemed to draw you in with an almost magnetic pull. Lisa Morgan, the mother, decided to clean it up and place it in the hallway. Almost immediately, strange things began to happen. At first, it was subtle. Items went missing, cold drafts brushed against your skin, and the faint sound of whispering could be heard late at night. But things quickly escalated. One evening, as Lisa was polishing the glass, she caught a glimpse of something that shouldn't have been there. A dark figure, just barely visible, seemed to be watching her from within the reflection. She spun around, but the hallway behind her was empty. Brushing it off as a trick of the light, she continued cleaning, but deep down, she knew something wasn't right. Over the next few days, her children began complaining of nightmares. They described seeing a man made of shadows standing at the foot of their beds, always silent, always still, but somehow getting closer each night. Lisa's husband, Mark, who didn't believe in the supernatural, laughed it off until he saw it too. Mark had always been a skeptic, but one night as he walked past the mirror, he noticed something strange. His reflection wasn't quite right. It lagged behind, moving unnaturally as if someone was mimicking his actions from the other side. And then, the reflection smiled, But Mark wasn't smiling. Panic gripped him, and he quickly turned away, but the damage was done. From that point on, the entire family started experiencing things they couldn't explain. They would catch glimpses of the shadow man in the mirror, standing just out of view, his presence growing stronger with each passing day. The Morgans reached out to a local historian who had some knowledge of the house's dark past. What they discovered sent chills down their spines. The mirror once belonged to the original owner, a reclusive man who was obsessed with the occult. Rumors suggested that he used the mirror in rituals, believing it was a gateway to another realm. When he died under mysterious circumstances, the mirror was sealed away, forgotten until it resurfaced decades later. Desperate, the Morgans tried everything, covering the mirror, moving it to the basement, even having it blessed, but nothing worked. The shadow grew bolder. It no longer waited in the reflection. It began appearing in their home, always in the corner of their eyes, watching. One night, the tension reached its peak. As the family sat in the living room, they heard a deafening crash. Rushing upstairs, they found the mirror shattered, but the pieces didn't lie on the floor. Instead, they seemed to be sucked into the dark, empty space behind the glass, as if the shadow had finally broken free. And then, the house went silent. After that night, the shadow man was gone, but the family wasn't safe. They still felt his presence, lingering just out of sight, watching them through every reflection, in windows, in other mirrors, even in the TV screen. They couldn't escape him. The Morgans eventually moved out, leaving the cursed mirror behind. To this day, the house remains empty, but locals claim that on certain nights, if you peer through the attic window, you can still see that mirror, reflecting something that shouldn't be there, a shadowy figure, waiting for its next victim. Remember, mirrors are more than just reflections. Sometimes, they hold onto things, dark things. So next time you look into one, be careful of what stares back at you. Like the story, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of the strange and unsettling. But beware, the next time you gaze into a mirror, you might see more than just your reflection.